Want to learn secrets to super fast marriage adjustment approvals? I'm so excited to share 3 of them in this video. While there are no actual secrets to achieving a super fast marriage adjustment of status approval, there are strategies that can help expedite the process when everything aligns favorably. And it is your job to align it favorably, since that is one thing that is within your control. And when you align everything right, you guarantee yourself a smooth immigration experience, not just right now, but also during removal of conditions and citizenship processes. And make sure to watch to the end, where we will show you how to check the USCIS web pages for some really useful tips that show up there from time to time. Hi, if you're new to our channel, I'm Margarita. I'm an immigrant myself, and my own painful and long immigration experience is what prompted me to become an immigration attorney. On this channel, we help ambitious professional couples handle their own marriage green card without making the mistakes I've made. I prolonged my immigration journey by quite a bit of time, so you don't have to. Alright, so let's dive right in with the strategy number 1, which is front-loading a ton of evidence with your initial application. Specifically, we will talk about bona fide marriage relationship, plus all the evidence you need to attach with the Form I-864 Affidavit of Support. And that's important because an RFE on that form can seriously delay your case. You know, in the past and even today, some attorneys prefer to send skeleton applications on behalf of married couples. And what I mean is they send bare bones applications with no evidence, and the idea is to supplement that application with all the necessary evidence at the interview. So many couples come to us after seeing our videos saying that they actually brought a ton of relationship evidence to whoever was helping them with the application, but none of that got submitted. And in the past, this idea made sense because in the beginning of a relationship, you might not have much joint evidence, but it's basically impossible not to have something. And either way, it is an old school way of going about this, especially now that so many interviews get waived when the initial application is complete. So let's talk about what this actually means. The idea is that you give them everything from the start, and even more. Do you want to attend an immigration interview? No, I don't think so. So keep listening. Let's start with relationship evidence, since that's the biggest thing in your entire application. Your marriage certificate is the number 1 thing, but keep in mind, you will need to attach it with multiple different forms, so get multiple copies of that one. The thing is, the USCIS separates the forms when they receive them, and forms are processed independently. So in order to avoid a request for evidence and thus a delay, you have to fulfill the evidence requirement of each form. Alright, 2 words about photographs. Couples often get so hung up on these, but it's not the strongest evidence you will have in your application, since anyone can take pictures and the USCIS knows it. Check out our video on how many photos to submit and how to organize it here. For the purposes of this video, all you need to know is that you need to include photos that document the history of your relationship, wedding, honeymoon, and other significant events involving both of you. Pictures can ideally be labeled with a brief description, date, location, and names of people present, but that is not a requirement. Also, don't spend too much time on photos, attach maybe 30 to 40 pictures altogether. Now let's talk about residential evidence. You need to show that you live together through utility bills, lease agreements, or mortgage documents with both names. If you do not have joint documents, you can provide individual documents that show the same address. Remember, the USCIS wants to see that you reside together, and that's a huge part of it. Sometimes couples come to us and they do not reside together at the moment, but they plan on living together at some point in the future. This is a bit more tricky, and you do need to be careful here as far as showing your intent to live together and potentially even writing a letter explaining your situation and listing a date when you intend to move in together. Which, by the way, if you've been quoted thousands of dollars by attorneys for this specific process, but you feel like you're more than capable to handle it yourself and would like to have a full roadmap to make sure you don't delay your green card, you're welcome to apply to our marriage immigration method. Inside our method, we guide couples through the entire immigration journey from right now all the way through naturalization, all in one place. Alright, now let's talk about letters from friends and family attesting to the validity of your relationship. We made a super detailed video on this subject, and you should definitely check it out. Just know that these letters should be detailed, including how the person knows you, the nature of your relationship, and specific anecdotes that illustrate the authenticity of your marriage. Next is communication. We get so many questions on this. You basically need to present records of correspondence such as emails, texts, chat logs, social media interactions, and phone call histories to show ongoing and genuine relationship. Sounds like a lot, but remember, the more you give them ahead of time, the more likely it is for you to get your green card in the mail without having to go through the dreaded and often unpleasant interview experience. If you're wondering how many screenshots of your correspondence to include, just truly use common sense. Whatever makes sense and whatever you're willing to share without going overboard. However, if you have some specific questions about this or anything else I mentioned in this video, just drop them in the comments and we will get back to you. Alright, another thing is travel records. Include itineraries, hotel receipts, boarding passes, or other documents that show you have traveled together or visited each other home countries. That's huge. But really the most important thing when it comes to bona fide evidence is joint financial documents. You need to provide evidence of shared financial responsibilities such as joint bank statements, joint credit cards, insurance policies, health, auto, life, and property insurance that list each other as a beneficiary or dependents, and property deeds or mortgage documents showing joint ownership. Remember, they also want to see that you share liabilities together as well. Which, by the way, if you need examples of bona fide marriage evidence, we've included our free list in the comments below. And the idea is to include everything you have from that list and get additional stuff if you're still missing something. Alright, so we talked about relationship evidence, but let's also cover Form I-864 evidence, since it's a combination of a few things that makes your immigration journey go smoothly. Couples usually really underestimate this form, but that's where a huge number of mistakes happen. You should take it seriously because we've had many couples come to us willing to pay us despite them having lawyers just because their own lawyer quoted them $2,000 to help with the request for evidence, so it can get intense. But all in all, it will cost you anywhere from $500 to $2,000 plus to respond to an RFE, so it's best to avoid having to go through this altogether. Aside from money, your level of stress will be pretty high, so it's simply not worth it. First, you need to fill out that form correctly, since it's often the mistake in the form that triggers an issue and not necessarily the evidence. The problem is that the USCIS often sends very generic RFEs on this form and you simply don't know what the problem is, so fill it out correctly on the first try. Otherwise, you will need to include a copy of your or sponsor's most recent federal income tax return, including all schedules. If you have not filed your most recent tax return but you're required to, you must file it and then provide proof of filing to the USCIS, and you might still get a request for evidence in this case, just from experience. If you were not required to file a tax return, provide a written explanation and include a copy of the IRS rules on who must file a return. Alright, you will also need to include proof of current income in the form of recent pay stubs, the last 3 to 6 months, that show your current level of income, and a letter from your employer stating your job title, the nature of your position, how long you've been employed, and your annual salary or wage. Additionally, you will need copies of your W-2s or 1099 forms for the most recent tax year. Don't forget that you always have to provide proof that the sponsor is either a U.S. citizen or a green card holder with this form, so a copy of a U.S. passport, birth certificate, naturalization certificate, certificate of citizenship, or green card must be there as well. Also, if you are using assets to qualify instead of or in addition to income, provide documents of those assets. They should include bank statements, appraisal values, deeds, and other records showing the asset's value. When a sponsor is self-employed, things become a bit more complicated and you need to provide additional information about your business, a letter from your accountant, etc. Alright, so that was strategy number 1. Let's now talk about strategy number 2. Look, you need to be on the offense and actually follow a proper step-by-step process if you want to get your green card either faster and or without hiccups. Otherwise, if you spend 3 months just trying to understand how this process works by watching all these YouTube videos and looking up some additional resources online, which are, by the way, often contradictory and confusing, then you just wasted those 3 months and you could have your green card by now. Literally. I'm sure you've heard about all these super fast green card approvals going on at the moment, but if you haven't, you can check out this video where we share a few interesting ones. Another very important point to make here. You know, couples often think that this process is about filling out and submitting a few forms, and so they often want to just get the list of the forms they need. And then I always have to ask them, okay, but how can you make sure that for your specific situation, these are the forms that you need? I'm not even talking about all the supporting evidence. And also, let's go past application submission, because in our experience, that's where all your questions just begin. Additionally, that's when your communication with the USCIS starts as well, and that's where it gets stressful because You might feel insecure, not sure if you did everything right, and you often just second guess yourself. The longer it goes, the less fun it gets. Either way, we do list all the forms you need to submit inside our free course, which you're welcome to download for free below. And I tried to go into as much detail as possible on different scenarios as well to give you an idea on where you need to get started. Final thought on this. Depending on your situation, you might not know when is the good time to get married or when is the good time to apply. Immigration is a lot about strategy as well. For example, if you're someone who is currently on OPT or you have a work visa like H-1B, or you might even be on a tourist visa in the US trying to not overstay, you obviously have to properly plan on how to execute this. You might wonder, okay, so what happens to my work visa if I get married and apply for this green card? Or what if my 6-month stay expires before I apply and I overstay? These are all the questions we get all the time, and inside our method, we help couples understand this process and know exactly how to properly execute on this to get through it as fast and efficiently as possible. And that's why we only focus on the marriage adjustment of status, because believe me, a lot goes into just this one process alone. And when you're doing this for the very first time, of course you aren't an expert and you're prone to have questions and make mistakes. The whole point of our approach is to help you eliminate these mistakes so you don't need to apply for citizenship twice, like I did, and you don't have your green card stolen from your mailbox like mine was. All right. Now, let's talk about the importance of completing and including your medical exam with your initial application, in addition to paying attention to the latest USCIS updates. Let's imagine that the USCIS decides that they don't need to interview you to make a decision on your green card application. They can just review your paperwork and say yes or no. In the past, a lot of people waited to bring their medical exam results to the interview instead of sending them in with the initial paperwork. That made sense then because you were guaranteed to have an interview. But now the USCIS often skips the interview if everything else looks good. If you don't send your medical exam results with your initial application and the USCIS decides to skip your interview, they will hit a snag. They need those medical exam results to finish up your case and give you a green card. Without them, they will ask you to send the results separately, going back to the request for evidence conversation, and it can really slow things down, sometimes by many months. Since the medical exam is good for 2 years after the USCIS civil surgeon signs it, it's just easier and faster to send it right away with your initial application. This way, if the USCIS doesn't need to see you in person, they can keep things moving along and get you your green card faster. And that is why it is so important to pay close attention to the latest USCIS updates, and let us show you what we mean. The problem is that you normally need to check a few different spots. Let's start with the Form I-485 webpage. From time to time, you will see different alerts here, and let's look at both of them real quick. Okay, so the first one is, below are ways you can help prevent an unnecessary delay in the adjudication of your Form I-485. So submit your medical exam with Form I-485 at the same time. File all required initial evidence and supporting documentation as described in the form instructions. Use the most current edition for Form I-485. Again, submitting all required initial evidence and supporting documentation at the same time may eliminate the need for us to issue a request for evidence to obtain additional evidence documentation, which may further delay adjudication in your case. If you're required to submit a Form I-693 or the medical exam, we cannot approve your Form I-485 without your Form medical exam. We generally consider a completed Form I-693, I don't know why they're saying generally, because that's just the case, to remain valid for 2 years after the day the civil surgeon signs it. And then the second alert is important as well. To improve efficiency and reduce Form I-765 processing times for Form I-485, we may separate Form I-765, so the work permit, and Form I-131, so the travel permit, filed at the same time. To improve efficiency and reduce processing times, we may separate these two forms filed at the same time. When possible, we adjudicate the request for employment authorization first, and if it is approved, we issue an EAD without any notation about advance parole. We adjudicate Form I-131 separately, and if it is approved, we issue an advance parole document. And that's exactly why currently your work permit will take anywhere from 1 to maybe a few months for you to get it, and then when it comes to the travel permit, that takes about a year. And finally, USCIS news. In immigration, things do change all the time. The USCIS is trying to tackle the green card backlog, and obviously they are trying to be more efficient. So if I were you, I would sign up for the email alerts. The problem is that they will send you alerts about everything, and 99% of that doesn't apply to you or your case at all and will only confuse you. If you'd rather receive only the latest updates on trends in marriage adjustment of status, then you're welcome to sign up for our newsletter below. We get some unbelievable feedback on the tips we share, so we look forward to sending those to you as well. I will also say that if you have some specific questions about your situation, you are more than welcome to drop them in the comments, and I will make sure to address each and every one of them. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.